Our friend and congregant, Joel Labinger, was up here and had the first Taliyah to acknowledge what we as a congregation also pause to acknowledge, and that is the 10th yahrzeit, the 10th anniversary since the passing of her husband and our colleague, our friend, and our teacher, Rabbi Marv Labinger. Rabbi Labinger was a great teacher in Israel, served as a chaplain, served the people Israel, served in many different roles within the community, and touched many different lives with his passion and his love for Am Yisrael, for the people Israel, and also Torah Hashem, God's holy teaching. And so it is with great pleasure today that we are able to share the bima with a colleague of his, a friend of his, someone whose own experience in serving and the range of service parallels to a certain extent Rabbi Labinger's. It is a pleasure to be able to call up to the bima at this time Rabbi Gil Kollin.
Shabbat Shalom. Rabbi Bernard, thank you. Rabbi Rothblum. I'd like to make a note before my Devar Torah that 2 weeks ago, a colleague of mine, Rabbi Morris Moshe Rubenstein, passed away, and I participated in his funeral. You might ask why, on the occasion here at this time, Rabbi Labinger's 10th yahrzeit, would I bring that up? Because Rabbi Rubenstein, Rabbi Labinger, and our lives are intertwined. Rabbi Rubenstein graduated from the Jewish Theological Seminary in 1959, became an Air Force chaplain, went to Turkey. Rabbi Labinger graduated in 1960, became an Air Force chaplain, went to Keesler Air Force Base in Biloxi, Mississippi. I graduated in 1961, became an Air Force chaplain. I replaced Rabbi Labinger in Keesler. Okay? A year later, I went over and replaced Rabbi Rubenstein in Turkey. And then later, we all find our life, we all spent our times in the Air Force, we all retired from the Air Force, and we all ended up here in Southern California. So this is an occasion which brings these multiple strands together. And I'd just like to offer my congratulations to the Goodmans on 60 years, and to Gabrielle for a wonderful bar mitzvah, and say I am honored, deeply honored to be here. Some years ago, 20 almost, in the Atlantic magazine published a lovely short poem by Mary Oliver called Mockingbirds. I'd like to share that with you this morning. This morning, 2 mockingbirds in the field were spinning and tossing the white ribbons of their songs into the air. I had nothing better to do than listen, and I mean this seriously. In Greece, a long time ago, an old couple opened their door to 2 strangers who, it soon appeared, were not men at all, but gods. It is my favorite story, how the old couple, who had almost nothing to give but their willingness to be attentive, but for this alone, the gods loved them and blessed them. And when they rose out of their mortal bodies like 1,000,000 particles of water from a fountain, the light swept into all the corners of the cottage, and the old couple, shaken with understanding, bowed down. But they still asked for nothing but the difficult life they already had, and the guard smiled as they vanished, clapping their great wings. Wherever it was that I was supposed to be that morning, whatever it was I said I would be doing, I was standing at the edge of the field. I was hurrying through my own soul, opening its dark doors. I was leaning out. I was listening. Thus the poem. Today is Shabbat Nachamu, the beginning of the countdown to Rosh Hashanah, a good time to start thinking about New Year's resolutions. So I want to talk about the same thing that Rabbi Bernard mentioned, talking to our happy celebrating couple, okay? I want to talk about listening as an act of love, a gift to ourselves and to others, and to suggest that all of us should resolve to become better, more loving, more responsive listeners in the new year so rapidly approaching. Probably the most familiar prayer to all of us is the Shema, which we said and we heard read from the Torah, which originates in this morning's Torah portion. I suspect that most of the time we recite it as a kind of incantation to mark the progress from the beginning of the service toward its end. Shema Yisrael, hear, O Israel, or in more colloquial terms, listen up, you Israelites. Listen to what? Pay attention to what? Earlier, just before we sang the Shema, we read the paragraph, Ahava Rabbah Ahavtanu. God, you loved us with a mighty love, right? You loved us deeply. Allow our hearts to understand and discern, to hear, study, and teach, and to perform with love all the teachings of your Torah. And we ended that, Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael, God who loves his people Israel. All right? And then we sing the Shema, and immediately after the Shema, V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha. Love the Lord your God with all your soul, with all your might. Or again in contemporary English, love God intellectually, emotionally, and materially. Now it would seem that the Shema is almost an intrusion between these two paragraphs. God loves you, love God in return. What's all this about? Listen up, Israel, for the Lord is our God, the Lord alone, however you want to translate these words, which are so deceptively simple and elusive in their meaning. The matter becomes clearer when we look at that second paragraph, the V'ahavta. At first it seems strange. Moses commands the people to love God. How can you command an emotion? How can you command a feeling? How can you command a relationship? After all, when talking about our parents, God doesn't insist we love them, only that we respect them. But a closer look at this, and we realize this isn't God talking, it's Moses. And Moses is not demanding feelings, Moses is demanding action. What does the V'ahavta say? Just before the Shema, in that Ahava Rabbah blessing, we spoke of God's love for us. The Siddur there describes an action. How did God love us? God gave us a Torah, a guide for life, and that Torah has indeed been the basis of our survival for over 3,000 years. How does Moses want us to reciprocate that love? By learning the Torah, by passing it on to our children, even writing the Shema and the V'ahavta on pieces of parchment and strapping them to our arms and putting them on the doorposts of our house. Our God, just like those gods in Mary Oliver's poem, wants our attention. He wants us to open the windows of our climate-controlled and clock-dominated souls, to lean out and, like Mary Oliver in that field, just to listen. Many of us as parents learned about ADD, right? Attention Deficit Disorder, that blocks the ability of children to focus and learn. Actually, many adults, including yours truly, have this problem. It doesn't go away when you grow older. The core of ADD is that you have a hard time listening. You can't pay attention. You can't focus outside. And it's recognized as a serious ailment, which blocks our ability to learn, to concentrate, to get things done, to relate to other people. But there's another kind of ADD, which is even more disruptive of our lives. And it's the inability to let go of the I long enough to engage the other. We usually experience it as victims of other people's unwillingness or inability to listen to us. A significant part of our very active therapy industry is the fact that therapists, beside their other skills, are what? They're professional listeners available for hire. In a world of busy, frantically, inwardly focused people, we need someone who will listen, or at least seem to be listening. My late wife, may she rest in peace, was a therapist specializing in helping dysfunctional families get their acts together. She often told me and them that teaching people how to argue is critical. Dismissive words like, "You don't get it," "You never seem to understand what I'm telling you," are epitaphs on the grave markers of failed relationships. Part of communications training is common courtesy, right? You have to let the other person complete their piece without interruption, but then, before responding, before saying what you want to say, you should summarize what you heard the other person say to make sure that what you think they said is the same thing they think they said. In short, you have to listen before you respond and convince the other person that you really heard what they were saying. A good admonition is, don't engage your mouth until your brain is in gear. Another is, there's a reason God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. Judaism's an audio religion, rich in sound. Our services are sung, our Torah is chanted. Each service, weekday, Sabbath, festival, High Holy Day, has its own unique nusach or melody. Shabbat and holiday meals begin with Kiddush and end with Birkat HaMazon, an oratorio of appreciation sung by those who have eaten the meal. We are commanded to hear the sound of the shofar and to remember that when God talked to Elijah on that mountain, it was a kol demamat daka, a still, small voice that required serious listening. So perhaps now we can understand what Moses was trying to tell our ancestors who stood on the banks of the Jordan River getting ready to go in the promised land and set up housekeeping. The way to reciprocate God's love is to listen, to give God your attention. And by extension, our attention is the most loving gift that we can bestow upon others, particularly those near and dear to us. Love is more than a feeling. Love is as love does. And it is by loving actions, such as listening, that we express our love. I hope I got your attention, and thanks for listening. Shabbat Shalom.